Hello, everyone. This is George Homer with EverFi. Thank you for joining our webinar today around sexual assault prevention, education, and compliance in Texas. I'm hosting this webinar with my colleague, Jennifer O. who is an account executive at EverFi. I'm a vice president here, helping hundreds of campuses with prevention and compliance over the last 9 years, and really appreciate you folks taking the time to join us today. And so, once again, really appreciate everyone joining us this morning. We have the privilege of having a deep presence in the state of Texas, working with over 50 institutions of higher education in the state. And so the UT system, the Alamo College system, Texas A&M campuses, Texas Tech, SMU, and others. And so I have the unique opportunity to actually work with hundreds of campuses across the country. And I don't sit in your seat, obviously, but I do get a chance to speak with a lot of folks who do. And so I'd like to take a minute here to share some of the insights that I've learned over the past several months meeting with our campuses in person, and then we can move on to our agenda and the rest of the content. And so as we look at the customers that we have in Texas, and some of you folks on this call are customers, some are not, but really, campuses in general sprinted to have a program for new students and new employees 3 years ago to meet the requirements of the Campus Save Act. And as we look at the current landscape with our 1,800 campus partners, we know that the complexity of training every employee every year has really required us as a leading provider in this market to look at our solution much differently. So talking about an expansive solution and providing a cohesive program campus-wide that addresses primary and ongoing training, as well as risk management topics like FERPA, like harassment prevention, diversity inclusion, youth protection is what the market really wants and needs. And so the days of having several departments manage different training topics without a central data repository, well, those days are coming to an end as we continue to bolster our programs and help our customers in a much deeper way. We also know one of the big challenges we see in the marketplace in helping campuses around faculty staff training can be in deploying courses to faculty and those folks adopting the courses. And so tenured faculty in particular, while very supportive of the initiative for the student population, can be less than enthusiastic about completing the courses themselves. And so fortunately, as a company that's been delivering online compliance training to employees for over a decade, we understand this dilemma. So we know that the bar is set very high for higher education. So all of our courses are higher ed version, relevant, modern, and professional. And I think lastly, before we move on here to the agenda, many of our customers had already started building a program in-house before we had arrived. And in some cases, we're looking at us for the student training and maybe looking at faculty staff as well. In either case, we saw some consistent patterns. Either they got a couple months in the development and started to run out of steam. There was this realization that the course would need to be updated on an ongoing basis, which made it impractical. Or in the worst case scenario, an OCR complaint arrived and it was too risky to entrust the development to those internal resources. And so the peace of mind of not having to maintain and update course content far outweighed the cost to implement a third-party solution. And so as we look at the agenda for today, this should be about 20 to 30 minutes. I know we've put 30 minutes out there, but definitely want to leave some time open for questions. And so we're going to be going through an overview of the current legislative landscape versus some of the new legislation that's being discussed in Texas. We're going to talk about how institutions are leveraging faculty and staff online training to address this increasing complexity in meeting these federal and state law requirements. And then we're going to talk about strategies to promote high adoption and completion of online training programs, because we know that you can have the best program out there, but if folks aren't adopting it and taking it and getting changing culture and behavior out of the material, that it's really an effort that doesn't make sense. And so having those strategies to talk about how to accomplish that are things that we'll be talking about today. So I'm going to hand this off to Jennifer O. who, like I said, is an account executive here at EverFi and has helped hundreds of campuses with their compliance and prevention strategy, go through some of the elements that go into an effective program, as well as some of the legal landscape. So Jennifer?
Hi, great. And thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. George, can you just give me a quick nod that you can hear me all right?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, great. So then, just kicking us off, late last year, EverFi distributed a survey to our network of 1,300 campuses to really better understand what are the most important elements of an online education program. And our compliance and our prevention teams have distilled that feedback into 5 key elements that are really priorities for institutions of higher ed across the country when we're thinking about what goes into an effective online program. So just wanted to share that feedback with you. So if we forward to the next slide, in no particular order here, but one of the things that comes up in pretty much every one of our conversations is compliance. And for a lot of our campuses, that's one, if not the main motivator for implementing educational programs around sexual assault or substance abuse, anti-harassment, FERPA. And for us, that's great because we know that the folks who created this legislation, for example, with Title IX, understood what it was going to take to change culture and move the needle on these topics in a meaningful way, which is why they've outlined such comprehensive mandates of demonstrating that you've made a good faith effort to train everyone every year. Next, we have content and how important that is to use multiple learning strategies, audio, visual, case studies to ensure that the content is fully accessible for employees of all hearing and visual ability is critical to engage learners and foster high adoption, which brings us to design. And educational design needs to fulfill its mission to educate and to engage. And that means it needs to be designed for its intended audiences. So whether that is a 19-year-old undergrad or a tenured faculty member, we understand that everyone has really high standards for how they consume content. And so it's important whatever material we provide is up to par with those standards. And then next we have administration. So for example, we've expanded Title IX mandates and the host of other topics institutions of higher ed are required to train on. Administration has become a really big focus for our partners. When bandwidth is tight, when your time, your staff's time is valuable, how do we leverage technology to facilitate the content and design getting to its intended audiences, to register participants, assign courses, send email reminders, track progress and completion, and store all of that information, which brings us to data. Students know that is a very important part of any compliance or prevention training strategy. Being able to really easily view completion data, track progress, and have all of that information on hand if you ever need it for reporting purposes is one of the biggest benefits we hear with online training. And so what's really interesting is that even though we've just presented these as 5 distinct elements, we also understand that they function very much as an ecosystem, because if you care about compliance, there are elements of content and design and data wrapped up in the compliance mandates. And similarly, if content and design are important, the administration of those also plays a really big role in ensuring that the content and design gets to the intended audiences. So we'll be really interested to hear when we follow up with those on the call today to get your perspective on what are the elements that most resonate with you and align with your training priorities. So with that, I'll hand it back off to George.
Thanks, Jennifer. And so to talk a little bit about the compliance landscape, and there's been quite a bit around compliance over the last 4 years. And so don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this because I'm sure everyone on this webinar knows about this compliance extremely well. But to talk a little bit about Title IX, and so we know that Title IX is top of mind. So sexual assault prevention is top of mind for our campus partners. And so I wanted to review some of those mandates that many of us are, like I said, already aware of and that are important to warrant review. And so the requirement that institutions provide primary prevention programming to all incoming students and employees, providing all continuing student employees with ongoing prevention training. And the kicker here is that we need to be able to document and demonstrate that we've met these requirements. And this is where many of our partners have shared that online training has been incredibly valuable, because having documentation of course assignments, email reminders, progress tracking, policy signatures, and stored all electronically and easily and available when you need it provides those records across the full population. Also want to address the Title IX requirements that really deepen institutional responsibility to train students and faculty on an ongoing basis. And so we know that schools should have primary and ongoing prevention, sexual assault prevention, sexual violence prevention training for all students at regular intervals, and then employees need to know what they're required to report on, as well as how to report those instances of assault. We also know, due to recent events, that there's many pieces of legislation in review that cover topics of consent, amnesty, sexual assault reporting, and mandated employees. And so we know Senate Bill 967 changed the definition of consent for prosecution of sexual assault and aggravated sexual assault. We know SB 970 would require colleges and universities to adopt a policy defining affirmative consent that's consistent with the principles that's set forth in the bill, apply the affirmative consent standard in disciplinary proceedings involving sexual misconduct, and develop and implement a public awareness campaign to educate students, faculty, and staff on the affirmative consent. We know SB 965 would protect minors who report sexual assault from being prosecuted. We know SB 969 would protect reporting students from disciplinary action for underage drinking at or near the time of the incident. SB 968 would require schools to provide electronic reporting options that allow anonymous reports of sexual assault, family violence, or stalking. And then SB 576 would require institutions of higher education employees and student officers to report sexual assault to the Title IX coordinator. So quite a bit out there, and all of this is very much relevant to many of the things that we've seen passed in the legislature over the last 4 years. And so to talk a little bit about some of the state law requirements, and so as laws are enacted and changed, all of the material that we provide, the course material, is updated to reflect these new laws. And so, for example, if the Texas bill defining affirmative consent becomes law, it'd be included in our primary student and faculty staff courses. And this page shows how a summary of the California affirmative consent law came about, what we've done here to change that. And so all of these courses are updated in real time to make sure that folks are aware that these laws have changed. But we also have the consent tab. We have the affirmative consent tab, which defines this for criminal prosecutions. And we know that laws have changed over the last several years. In New York, we know 129B, enough is enough. We know California, yes means yes. We know Illinois, HB 821, have all addressed many of the affirmative consent pieces. And so we know that the legal piece of this really needs to be addressed in an ongoing and proactive as well as dynamic way. We also know that there's been changes to the student amnesty law. And so this is an example out of Wisconsin State. And this really summarizes the state sexual assault victim amnesty law. And there's links to relevant statutes that are provided. And so, so we know that there's been changes in a number of states, and we want to just make the group here know that anything that you folks are already using with EverFi as an existing customer would be updated. Any of the faculty staff programs that are adopted moving forward would also be updated in an ongoing way. And we know from an accountability perspective, from a compliance perspective, that in 2013, we looked at this from a new student, new employee program. We know that in 2015, it changed to primary and ongoing for all students and all employees. But we know that there's been more that's been done through the Department of Education's Campus Safety Handbook. So it goes beyond simply making primary and ongoing training available to students and employees, but actually these initiatives need to be developmentally appropriate. They need to be tailored to the strengths and needs of an institution, and that the institution must actually demonstrate a good faith effort to actually reach and train every student and employee with these programs every year. And so this started out roughly as 25% of the population, and it now has expanded to everyone every year, which creates a number of complexity that we'll be talking about today, and how we continue to drive high adoption to help customers and campuses address this in a scalable and efficient way. But we know, having conversations with our campus partners, what is very clear is that whoever we're talking with, be it a VP of HR, a legal counsel, a campus risk officer, a dean of students, a wellness counselor. Everyone's committed to creating a healthy, positive, and thriving community for students and employees. And so our network is deeply passionate about these issues and cares a great deal about making a difference on campus and keeping communities safe. And so we know that sexual assault is a widespread systemic problem in higher education. And so this requires us to put in place systemic population level prevention programs. And so, the data is clear that brief, single shot, once and done programs don't have long-term impact. And so as we look at addressing these from a prevention perspective and really doing the right thing, we know that having the primary course, the baseline, the longer version, and in some cases for faculty, shorter versions are critical. But as we look at going through this year to year, having iterative, ongoing, shortened programs that are changed every year, and so that folks are always getting material, they always know what to do if a reporting piece comes about. These are areas that are critical, and from a prevention perspective, we know that having these iterative, ongoing programs to enhance primary and have the data and tracking are all critical areas to not only meet the requirements of the law, but do the right thing. And so we know beyond the legislation that's already in place around Title IX, there's a host of other topics in higher education to train on that are considered best practice. And these topics can range across multiple departments and offices, whether that's anti-harassment and discrimination, FERPA, ADA, data security, diversity and inclusion, health and safety. And so we understand that higher education is decentralized by design. However, the gravity of these topics of sexual violence, discrimination, data security, and the impact that these issues have across the entire community is motivating institutions to approach this collectively to address historical inefficiencies in this type of training. And so whether it's wanting to engage third-party vendors for expertise in these areas or addressing this frictional loss that occurs with multiple vendors for fringe contracts, we know that having a single data repository, having consistency and unified messaging to ensure that these employees have the knowledge and understanding of compliance requirements and legislation related to their role is critical. And to deploy that training, to track progress, to have e-signatures, to store all of that electronically is really something that is critical. And so having these areas addressed in a systematic way is something that we're talking about today. On the faculty and staff side, we do have a wide range of courses, and as I'd mentioned, most of the folks on this call are using our student programs, which is great, but we have 500 campuses that actually use faculty staff, and they use it for Title IX, and so we're committed to developing a new and different program for ongoing for Title IX and Title VII on an annual basis. We know that engaged learners learn better, and that part of maintaining engagement is continuing to provide this new and different experience annually, especially for employees when the tenure at an institution can be much longer than that of a student. So no one wants to take the same program year after year. In addition to the Title IX, we're talking about additional topics like anti-harassment, like ADA, like diversity, HASCOM, FERPA, and the hope here is to provide a platform from which to deploy a variety of courses. And the beauty of this library is that it provides the flexibility to implement compliance and prevention as you see fit for the institution. So all very much important areas. And so I'm going to pause here. I'm going to hand this back off to Jennifer so that she can walk through some of the content design and what we're doing for campuses. So take it away, Jennifer.
All right, thanks, George. So we know many of our campus partners chose our solution for the quality of our content, and so we're committed more than ever to making sure that course quality continues to meet the high bar that's set for higher ed. We use a host of different learning strategies to promote adoption and completion, and so just wanted to walk through a couple exercises to show you what that looks like. So if we could forward to the next slide, great. So this is an interactive scenario in our Title IX training course. In this situation, a chemistry student is harassed by a professor and goes to the dean. So the question becomes, what should the dean do? And if we go to the next slide, we know that if the dean does nothing, that answer is incorrect. We always have to get everything right to move forward. So I just can't click through the course without getting the material right. We know in this situation, the dean needs to report to the Title IX coordinator. We get feedback on why that answer is right, and then the participant can move forward in the course. And so a big part of our goal is to keep employees engaged and avoid autopilot. So another feature of this course is that if you open it up in a browser and try to open up another tab just to have the course, running in the background, the course pauses. So you need to click back to the course and press continue and be engaged in order to move forward. So at the end of the day, as an administrator, you'll know that everyone who has completed the course has A, gotten all the answers correct, and B, has had to pay attention to the information in a meaningful way. If we move forward to the next slide, this is a scene from our data security course. We use videos that are modern and realistic, and data security continues to be a highly utilized course based on the fact that data breaches are usually the result of human error, and that institutions of higher ed are hubs of personally identifiable information. So this course addresses those challenges and encourages participants to view data and information much like they would their other valuables, their wallet, their purse, their car, and other things you wouldn't want to just leave out in the open for the taking. So if we forward, depending on the learning objective, again, we use a lot of different learning strategies to be specifically tailored to the objective for that course. So in this case, participants are required to click on each of the numbers to understand why that part of this email is suspect and might be a phishing scam. So if we forward, you'll see that number 1, is suspect because it's a bad return address. Number 2 is an attachment extension that is often used to transmit viruses. And number 7, it reminds participants to check that the URL is actually linking to the page it's saying it's linking to before clicking on it. And so this is just one section of our larger data security and privacy training program. If we move forward, this is an example of another learning strategy, a real-world case study to demonstrate how the topics we're educating on apply to the real world and workplace. And then next, we have our policy acknowledgements, which can be added into your course and customized to your organization. So these are also tracked within the platform and have been really valuable to our partners rather than tracking this type of information manually with pen and paper for every employee. Our partners have the ability to use policy e-signature and have this available digitally across Title IX, Title VII, and on other topics in case you ever need to provide this information. It's really easily accessible. So with that, I'll hand it back over to George.
Thank you, Jennifer. And so from an administrative perspective, we talked about adoption and course completion. And so, when we look at the integration side, and some campuses may want to integrate, some may not, some may want to automate, but we have protocols in place that allow you to get high adoption, and this is the technology aspect. And not everyone does this, but it's definitely something to think about. And so we have the LMS integration to where we can link in through Moodle or Skillsoft or another learning management system, Blackboard, Canvas, SumTotal, Cornerstone, you name it. HRIS, so Oracle, SAP, that where you would be getting flag courses that would be, so your HRIS would communicate to our system, and then those courses are launched automatically, and then the data comes back into the HRIS from our system, so it's an inbound, outbound data automation. We also have single sign-on options as well, so that people aren't having to go to multiple places to access their programs. And then talking about additional functionality here. And so accessibility is one of the biggest hurdles we've heard when institutions have been doing this in-house. And so ensuring that content is fully accessible. We know over half of the OCR complaints are related to disability-based discrimination. So this is really top of mind for a lot of folks right now. Also automated email reminders. So again, in the absence of a carrot or a stick, the onus of the adoption and completion fall on the quality of content, which we've discussed already, and the administrative ease. And so how easy is it to see progress and send email reminders? How easy is the administration? Really is critical. And driving adoption and completion. And so that we know that training is only part of your roles. And so we want to help streamline that process and make it as easy as possible. Now getting into a new modern and engaging dashboard, we know that as we look at the batch upload, we're able to manually upload a list of folks and then select courses that we want these individuals to take. And this can be done in a mass assignment. It can be done in a one-off. So it's very flexible to address your specific training needs and helps to facilitate that high adoption. We also know tailored email communications through the platform where we're actually putting in copy that's resonating, that's specific to your campus, and allows them to actually go right into the course from the hot link or their login and password. And then scheduling automated email reminders. So you can do a quarterly based curriculum of courses so that you have specific topics that are designated for each quarter or each month. And then you can set up refresher courses to go out automatically in the future. These are all ways that help facilitate a high adoption and completion rate to make sure that it's as easy and hands-off as possible. And then you also have extremely detailed dashboards to analyze the completion rate. You'll be able to visualize the progress of the employees and export the reporting as needed. And so we work with campuses of all shapes and sizes, and this platform has the functionality and flexibility to support campuses, whether they have 5,000 students or 50,000 folks. And so getting into the data, which is another critical component here, and so looking at the compliance and prevention strategy, and so having everything in real time, 24/7 access. It doesn't get any better from what EverFi does. And so we know that data helps drive strategy. We know that having this in real time is critical in making sure that you're able to access your data 24/7, have it electronically stored, having policy acknowledgements, course completions is all something that is of tremendous value to our institution partners. And so EverFi has been committed to the compliance and prevention space for the last 15 years, long before the media was covering incidences of sexual assault on a regular basis. And so when we look at the scope of what we're doing here with the acquisition that we've made of Law Room Campus Clarity, we're servicing 1,800 campuses, 6 million faculty, staff, and students trained per year. And this is really the largest investment in higher education for sexual assault and substance abuse ever. And so bringing together 1,800 campuses to essentially scale and use thought leadership, peer reviews, assessment surveys, all things we couldn't do before, create more value for the marketplace and for our campus partners. And we know that the courses, the data, the platforms can only be as good as the folks behind them. And so we have over 100 employees that are dedicated to our higher education line of business. I'd like to spend a couple seconds actually, because we are running tight here on time, a couple of seconds to talk about who these folks are. And so these are prevention leaders. Rob Bulow, Kimberly Temp lead the prevention team. We just brought on Holly Ryder-Milkovich. But in terms of the credentials, these folks bring over 50 years of higher education experience into their work every day. On the compliance side, we have 10 lawyers on staff to make sure that courses are up to date. So if there's changes to the Texas state law, these folks are the ones that are on a daily basis making sure that all courses are up to date and meeting requirements of the law. Lastly, the Campus Prevention Network. So this is an unprecedented group of our member campuses, 1,800 strong folks that can access resources and thought leadership, peer-to-peer opportunities to connect with others and see best practices. So really the goal here is to lift all boats higher with a rising tide of information in this field of compliance and prevention. And so so we are coming up here on our end of time. I've put up our contact information. We are sending a recording on this out. We are going to send some course links as well. But if folks have questions, if there are areas that we're needing more clarification, please reach out to us. I'm George Homer. We have Jennifer O'Young. We have our contact information here on the screen. We are sending a recording. We do appreciate everyone taking some time to meet with us today, and look forward to continuing to help our higher education partners in Texas and across the U.S. With these critical topics. Thank you very much, everyone.